The 1990s saw so-called extreme sports increasingly integrate themselves into mainstream culture. The first X Games competition was broadcast on ESPN in 1995, with things like skateboarding, sky surfing, and, canoeing? Anyway, 2 years later, the first Winter X Games was held, and the keynote event was snowboarding. Around this time, the first snowboarding video games started to trickle out to arcades and consoles, and as a genre, snowboarding games had a weirdly high early success rate, from the rad physical cabinet of Alpine Surfer to well-liked cartridges like 1080 Snowboarding and Snowboard Kids 2. The first recurring series in the genre was the Cool Boarders franchise. The first two Cool Boarders games were developed by UEP Systems, and they sold well but received a very mixed reception critically thanks to their wonky collision detection and limited gameplay selection. For Cool Boarders 3 and 4, publisher Sony switched developers to their own in-house 989 studios, but UEP was still hard at work on another snowboarding game, which got released as Cool Boarders Burn in Japan, but rights issues led to it being renamed in the US as RIPPIN Riders Snowboarding. But the tendrils and picadillos of the Cool Boarders franchise unfortunately remain. One thing that video game developers took a weirdly long time to figure out in the extreme sports genre was how to integrate tricks into gameplay. Years and years of skateboarding and BMX games treated these sports exclusively as racing games, just downhill sprints on a new mode of transportation. After a few years, some games started trying to fold in point systems for tricks, but they hadn't quite figured out how to structure the game to make these things matter. Tony Hawk's Pro Skater felt like a revelation, because they figured out how to make a skateboarding game engaging, by giving you worlds structured for maximum trick opportunities, and a point system that rewarded you for them, as well as a series of challenges and assignments to complete in the time frame. RIPPIN Riders doesn't have any of that. RIPPIN Riders wants to have that, but it doesn't. Back on the Trick Style episode, I discussed how that game vexed me because it had a trick metric that didn't seem to actually count towards anything, and so much of the game was just pointless, impersonal races that weren't any fun. But Trick Style's issue was that its creators mostly were just psyched about floating hoverboard physics, and this was their first try. RIPPIN Riders was supposed to be, as stated, the fourth Cool Boarders game, so there's truly no excuse for them not to have their shit together. RIPPIN Riders wants you to do cool tricks. It screams about it over and over with its cool, sarcastic Gen X announcer guy.
Here comes the trick queen! Get ready for it! Bomb that cliff!
But also, it has races that are almost entirely flat downhill land. There's like 2 total places to do anything other than a basic bunny hop, which it then chastises you about.
Oh, what are you doing?
Which you get to hear over and over as no new opportunities arise for cool moves.
Oh, come on, you gotta practice a little more.
Even funnier, it has trick-specific competition settings that are not only set on the same flat courses, but also that you can only win by getting to the finish line first, no matter who has more points. The tracks generally are just poorly designed, even as tracks to race on. As stated, there's basically nowhere to catch any air, and things that appear like you should be able to vault on just turn out to be impediments you barrel into and crash, or occasionally even clip into and get stuck. I was constantly finding myself sidling up to something that looked like a ramp and just spinning in place going 0 miles per hour for my troubles. In the years after 1999, snowboarding and extreme sports remained very popular. But other than one very acclaimed series, the market for snowboarding video games basically permanently dried up. That franchise, EA Sports SSX, which began as a launch title for the PlayStation 2, had gorgeous graphics and went satisfyingly over the top with tricks and battles, and was pretty much the only series on the scene that managed to integrate good reactive controls and engaging gameplay to match their sassy extreme attitude. Because without responsive movement, you could end up with a loud, frozen lecture simulator like RIPPIN Riders that gives you nothing worth doing and gets mad when you're not doing more. Next time, have you ever been on fire from downtown in 3D? Boom shakalaka.